Hi, and welcome to the Baptist Anchor Webcast. I'm Danny Jones. I'm president of Emmaus Baptist College, and I'm the editor of the Baptist Anchor magazine. In today's broadcast, I'm so happy to be chatting with Dr. Scott Stripling. Dr. Stripling is a distinguished archaeologist and biblical scholar. He's got a PhD from Veritas International University in biblical archaeology or archaeology and biblical history. He serves as the provost and the director of archaeology at the Bible Seminary in Katy, Texas. And he's also the director of excavations for the Associates of Biblical Research at ancient Shiloh, which is a location of biblical significance because it was Israel's first capital and it was the resting place of the tabernacle. Now, under his leadership, the Shiloh excavation has become the largest current archaeological excavation in the Middle East. He serves as the president of the board of directors for the Near East Archaeological Society and has authored numerous books and articles, peer-reviewed journals, and has contributed significantly to the field of biblical archaeology. He's been featured in various media outlets, Fox News, New York Times, TBN, History Channel, Discovery Channel. Dr. Stripling, it's great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Danny. It's a real joy to be with you, brother, and appreciate your partnership in this good work.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of spending a little bit of time digging with you in Israel, and I can't wait for this year's dig season. Lord willing, I'll be bringing some of our college students from Emmaus Baptist College on the excavation this year. Scott, I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us today. It is an honor to have you with us on our broadcast. But to start, can you tell us a little bit about your background? What led you to pursue a career in biblical archaeology, and how did you become involved in excavations in Israel?
I grew up in the Baptist faith and came to know the Lord at an early age. I was a Bible reader. Over time, as I kind of got into my 20s and began to study advanced degrees toward terminal degrees, first at University of Texas, and then later through seminary, and then later the doctoral program, I found myself frustrated with some of the answers that people were giving me regarding the difficult passages of the Bible. I don't think anyone was intentionally giving me bad information. I just think that people were struggling with a lack of awareness of the material culture. And that's really what drove me, was this appetite to understand what it meant to them then and there, how the material culture could contribute to our understanding of the biblical text. And so, having an addictive personality, I was drawn completely into this, and into this vortex, and consumed everything I could get a hold of, began to take courses, volunteer on digs. And so that's how it started. And then, of course, a man plans his steps, but the Lord directs his ways.
Amen. Amen. Well, Shiloh is a site of great biblical significance. Could you give us a brief overview of its role in the Bible and why it's such an important location for archaeological study?
Well, we have a disputed mention in Genesis 49. There's some textual variants that some would argue you have a mention of Shiloh very early in Jacob's prophecies. Others would argue that 1 Samuel chapters 3, 2, 3, and 4 are your first mentions when the tabernacle arrives at Shiloh. Joshua gives the order to erect it there. We know from Joshua 18:1. He's from the tribe of Ephraim, and Shiloh lies within Ephraim territory. In fact, his hometown is just a few miles from Shiloh. Timnah Heres, it's called in the Bible, and that is currently under excavation by a good friend of mine, David Raviv, who's a great young Israeli archaeologist. So Shiloh matters because God said, "I cause my name to dwell there." Jeremiah 7:12, "Go now to Shiloh, where I first caused my name to dwell. See what I did there." And I just believe that was our mandate, is to go to Shiloh, examine it through the archaeological lens. And we'd excavated other conquest sites in the highlands of Israel, so we had a good idea of the material culture and what to anticipate. And in my perfect world, I would have said, boy, if we were to find evidence of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, of the gate of Shiloh mentioned in the Bible, and of the sacrificial system. That would be the trifecta. And after now 6 seasons of excavation over the last 8 years, it appears that that's just what we have found.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, and I know that there's a new word I've heard for the first time, and I learned it from you. Something that you possibly have found this past season, and that word is fasiva. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and what you found?
Okay, a favisa is a
Favisa.
sacred, yeah, favisa, very new word, right? It's a Favissa. It's a Latin term, but favisa is a sacred deposit. Now, we archaeologists love garbage. Okay, we can talk trash with the best of them, but this isn't regular trash. This is sacred deposits. It's what's left over from the sacrificial system. So after these animals have been sacrificed and these drink offerings have been poured out and these financial gifts have been brought, what happens with that material, with the leftover stuff? You don't just cast it out with the regular garbage. So it fills a pit over time, and you can even see incremental deposition over time. And we have studied these throughout Israel. We have a good typology of what is the difference between a foundation deposit and a what they call a sacred feast and a favisa, a sixfold criteria set out by Ross Kletter. Ours meets all six of these. It's due east of the monumental building, which we believe was the building of the tabernacle, maybe 40 to 50 meters due east on the eastern perimeter of the site, and just amazing what we have found there.
Is that something that you can discuss? Some of the artifacts that you have found?
Yeah, I can tell you it's kind of the overview. We have found about, let's say, 7 to 8 thousand bones, animal bones, in this small area, and we have tested them zooarchaeologically. We have no human bones there, but we have the overwhelming majority of them are caprines and bovines, so sheep and goat and cattle, and then a small assortment of other bones. So the bones are disproportionately from the right side of the animal, and so this is very important. Of course, for a Bible reader, you pick up on this type of thing. Any of your students who are sleeping through Leviticus, tell them I said to wake up. Leviticus has become my go-to source. Leviticus chapter 7 tells us that the right side of the animal is the priest's portion. And so we're finding, here's another good word, verisimilitude. We're finding a consistency between the material culture and the biblical text. If it were indeed a reliable text, what would we expect to find is what we're finding, like disproportionate bones from the right side. Within that favisa, we also have hundreds of restorable ceramic vessels. And this is really interesting because we find 2,000 pieces of pottery a day at Shiloh, as you well know, and but maybe once a week we have a restorable vessel. But out of our favisa, which is an area D, they're almost all restorable there, and they're goblets and bowls, the types of things that we would expect from, say, a drink offering being poured out. So the picture is someone brings this animal is sacrificed. There is then a drink offering, wine or something of value, is poured out upon the altar. And the Apostle Paul, of course, picks up on this imagery in Philippians when he's talking about being poured out upon the sacrifice and service of your faith. And then the vessel in which the libation was is then broken because it also has value. And so the drink offering, the vessel, and the bones that are left over are then deposited in this favisa. Finally, we have sacred objects. So far, 7 gold pieces have come out of this small area. Now, gold is very rare at archaeological sites. Most archaeologists have told me that they worked their entire career and have never found anything gold. So we have these pendants, stars, and other shapes, very thin, like what we would call sheet gold, and they're all within this very small area. Danny, people didn't lose gold in antiquity. Okay,
Right.
it wasn't like a gold filling fell out or something. It's a concentration and it is intentional. Now, they're not all within 10 inches like we would call a hoard. No, it's within several meters that they're there, that people are bringing things of great value. They're giving them to Yahweh. Because remember, this is before currency. The shekel, when it's mentioned in the Pentateuch, is a weight. It's not a denomination. So you don't have coins yet. So we don't have coins, we don't have checks, we don't have secure online transfers of wealth. I mean, people are bringing something like this that has great value. The bones, the pottery, and the objects are what make this Favisa at Shiloh of tremendous significance.
Amen. Well, there was something that you'd mentioned about the historical accuracy of the Bible. Now, archaeology is a field that intersects with biblical studies, and there are some scholars that believe the Bible is just a purely theological text. But the biblical maximalist would view it as historically accurate. Now, how do you balance that faith and science in your work? And how does archaeology contribute to our understanding that the Bible is a historically accurate document?
It's a tightrope that we walk because, as you know, you've participated in the excavation. It's a highly scientific operation that we're running. It's cutting edge technology that we're bringing to bear. As an archaeologist, I get one bite at the apple. Okay, if I make a mistake, I can't go back and repeat the experiment because in the process of excavating, I'm destroying the evidence and then making it inaccessible to others. And so there's a great burden upon me to do it right the first time. We have all the hard sciences that come to bear. Archaeology itself is a soft science, but all the hard sciences come to bear in it. So I'm very diligent in that, and I collaborate with scientists and professionals outside of my circles. So you'll see specialists on our dig that are coming in from Tel Aviv University, from University of Manitoba, from various places doing high level scientific testing on objects. They're co-writing papers with me, co-presenting with me. So when I'm presenting the results, I don't want it just to be, well, there goes Stripling. He's just one of those evangelicals. He just wants to prove the Bible. No, I mean, this team that I'm leading is highly scientific and highly collaborative. Now, on the other side of that, there is a movement within academia and within archaeology to not talk about your faith and not talk about the Bible. And it's almost like the Bible is guilty until proven innocent. I don't buy into that paradigm and I don't participate in that paradigm. And my colleagues, I think for the most part, are okay with that because they respect me as an archaeologist. My argument is that the Bible is a reliable historical source and that it should be taken as such, at least on the same ground that we would take the Mesopotamian literature and the Egyptian literature. I'm not asking to slant the field in my favor, okay? I'm just asking to give us a level playing field, and then the Bible can take care of itself just fine.
Mhm. You talked about some of those new scientific techniques, and one of the newer techniques that you've used at Shiloh is wet sifting, which has led to the discovery of some pretty significant small objects. Can you explain what wet sifting is and why it's been so beneficial to your excavation?
When we dry sift, now most excavations don't dry sift everything, they selectively dry sift. We dry sift everything. So there's a sieve, we excavate in the square, and then we take that same soil, dump it into a screen, you shake the screen, and you examine to see what you may have missed. And there's always things. Those are then tagged so we know exactly where they came from. Then that soil, once it's been dry sifted, we have a kind of a funnel system. It goes down into a pail with a color coded tag on it. and then we take it down to our wet sifting station where we wash the material. We have our own water tower and our own fire hoses and water hoses and sprayers. And so, of course, we have trained people and supervisors that are overseeing this. That material is then washed so that once we remove all the dirt, wow, now it's shocking what we have been missing in the past. In fact, I've gone back on in two different digs from the 1980s and wet sifted and processed their dump piles that they left behind after the excavation. And I found more small finds, like scarabs, for example, in the dump pile than they published in their excavation reports. We've been missing about 75% of the small finds evidence in the past. And that's staggering. That's staggering because we're drawing big biblical conclusions. Let's say you're excavating at Megiddo and you say, well, we didn't find evidence in stratum 10 or whatever of such and such. Well, not when we're throwing away the majority of the evidence. And so this is why it's such a revolutionary technology. And we do everything. We dry sift and then wet sift everything. The gold pieces that I'm talking about, most of those we found, of course, we metal detect very carefully also, but between metal detecting and wet sifting, if we weren't doing that, we would have thrown away the majority of those small finds.
Mm. Well, you're pretty well versed in most all ancient Near East artifacts, and I know that from sitting in on some of the object reading sessions. But I've spent the past 20 years or so studying just one aspect, and that's biblical numismatics. And for those who are unfamiliar with the term, that's ancient coins. Now, coins don't show up in the historical record, as you pointed out about the shekel in the Old Testament being a weight, and later on it was that same term was used for that same weight that was made into a coin sometime around the 6th or 5th century BC. What just for me personally, because that's my field of expertise. What's the most exciting coin find that you've seen, and what's the significance of finding coins in different strata?
Coins electrify everyone. Everyone loves to find a coin. I have strict orders when you find a coin, don't yell coin because everyone's going to stop working and they want to come look at it. When we find silver and gold coins because they're so rare. I mean, I'll give you an example. At Kermit El Makadar, our previous excavation, we excavated 1,322 coins.
Wow.
1,315 were bronze. 5 were silver and 2 were gold. So just think about those proportions. So when you're asking me like, what's the most exciting coin? Well, it narrows it down quite a bit because we're now probably looking at these silver and gold coins, the revolt coins. So first and second Jewish revolt coins, always interesting because they're very datable. They help us date the levels or what we call the strata. We have some Persian coins at Shiloh. So these are some of the earliest coins that are minted. Those are always important. They're always interesting because, in my view, they are propaganda. They are either royal imperial propaganda or they're local propaganda. I mean, they say something. And the Hasmonean coins are always interesting because we find first century, second century BC Hasmonean coins. We always find them in a first century AD context. Not to say they're not also in the first century BC context, but they continue. No other coins don't do that. So we're talking 150, 200 years later, they're still in circulation. And one asks himself why? Because the pottery is first century AD and the coins are first century or second century BC. So for a while, this had me stumped, but I've come to believe that the local Jewish population is under imperial Roman domination and control, under military occupation. And those stars on those Hasmonean coins, that messianic star on those Hasmonean coins, what we call the widow's mite, many times, every time they use those, it's a reminder we may be under domination, but there's another day that's coming. Not to say they didn't use Roman coins when they had to. I mean, money's money, right? I mean, they're trying to get by, but their preference is clearly for these earlier coins. So the revolt coins, the Hasmonean coins, the Persian coins, there's just a lot of, as you know, this is probably what drew you into the field, a lot of interesting things.
That's awesome. Um, here's another question on a different subject. But there at Shiloh, have you identified any evidence from the transition from Canaanite to Israelite occupation? And if so, what are the key indicators?
That's a great question. It's not as easy as people think because there is a shared material culture. They share an alphabet, for crying out loud. I mean, Canaanite and Hebrew are the alphabets are virtually identical. About the only way you can tell the difference is if you have words that are uniquely Canaanite or uniquely Hebrew, like Yahweh, for example.
Hmm.
There's only one group of people in the ancient world at that time that are worshiping Yahweh, then that would be a clear sign. With pottery and so forth, Canaanites and Israelites are using essentially the same pottery, unless there were designs or decorations on it that were theomorphic or something like that. Then how would we know? Like my Muslim neighbors today, they use pretty much the same dishes that I use. It's not like it's a giveaway that they're a different religion because they're Muslim. So it is challenging. Where we do see the difference is in the diet. And so, for example, at Shiloh, we have stratum 8, stratum 7, those are Middle Bronze Age. Stratum 6 is where our transition occurs, and we're Late Bronze Age. This is when Israelites arrive. So the diet, because we have the seeds, so through our flotation system and our deep fraction system, we're able to extract seeds, study those with our botanist, and then see what was the diet in the Canaanite level, if you will, 8 and 7, before
Mhm.
the Israelites arrive. And does it remain the same in stratum 6 and then in stratum 5 and stratum 4, which are Jewish? It changes. Okay. So the animal diet, so it's flora and fauna. So the fauna is very interesting. We have about 4% pig bone in the Canaanite levels and in the Christian levels once we get later in the Byzantine period when the Christians are back. But in between there, in First Temple period and Second Temple period, we have about 1% pig bone. And so it's a noticeable difference. And so that's where I see it is in the nuances. Occasionally you'll get lucky and there'll be an inscription or something that can help you more clearly, but it's in those little bitty things that help us understand it.
Your team's discovery of the lead curse tablet, and I believe that was through wet sifting also at
Right.
Mount Ebal. That created a major stir in archaeological circles. Could you walk us through that significance and the discovery?
Yeah, we were, of course, excavating at Shiloh, and then this was intended to be a side project, a winter project that I did in December 2019. And it goes back to this project that I wanted to do to take old dump piles from the 1980s, process them with wet sifting, and see what we found and compare that with what the archaeologist who published it found. Not to make anyone look bad, I'm just trying to understand methodologically, can I quantify, is there a better way to do this? Because to convince my colleagues in archaeology, we're all sticking sticks in the mud. We want to keep doing it the same way that we've been doing it. So that's why we went to Mount Ebal, and we did not excavate. What we did is we processed the dump piles, primarily the east dump pile, and then some from the west dump pile. The east dump pile, according to Adam Zertal's notes, was where the soil from the altar area had come, and then the west dump pile was different. So we tracked it E and W, and we it was very complex because we had to relocate the material to another site where we had water and so forth. It all worked out. And to make a long story short, we dry sifted this soil and then we wet sifted it. We built a provisional wet sifting system. And it was through that process that actually Frankie Snyder, who was our most experienced wet sifter from her experience at the Temple Mount Sifting Project and is our wet sifting supervisor, that it was in her tray that this came to light. And I remember that day very well. It was a really nice, sunny, cool but sunny December day. And Frankie called my name. She said, "Scott, you better come see this." And that's either, Danny, that's either really good or really bad when that happens. Okay. And I walked over and I looked down in her tray and I just couldn't believe it. I mean, she knew what it was immediately. And I knew what it was immediately. It's a known quantity within archaeology, a defixio or a curse. It's a folded lead tablet. I've seen hundreds of them. And I called Abigail over and she saw it and immediately knew what it was also. And so the three of us just stood there saying, "You got to be kidding me. A curse tablet from the mountain of the curse, Mount Ebal, from the altar," because this was from the east dump. And I remember I immediately said to them, "Don't get your hopes up too high, because I mean, this is important, but it's probably from a later time period, because I know these from the Hellenistic and Roman period. I don't know them from earlier time periods, um, but even if someone in a later period recognized that it was Joshua's altar, the mountain of the curse, and deposited a tablet there, it's important." I just said, don't get your hopes up. But while I'm saying that, I'm thinking that doesn't make any sense what I'm saying, because we don't have any Greco-Roman pottery. It's all very, very early pottery. And of course, in the end, when we were able to date this using the tomographic scanning in Prague, we saw the inscription and what we believed was indeed predating Paleo Hebrew, a proto-alphabetic Hebrew script with the name Yahweh within it and a series of curses. Then this was phenomenal. We published it in Heritage Science. I saw the other day someone sent me the stats. I think it has about 75,000 reads in the initial article, not to mention the countless numbers in secondary media and so forth. And yes, it set off a firestorm of controversy, because this challenges paradigms that are longstanding. Like, for example, literacy. Were Moses and Joshua literate? Well, the documentary hypothesis, as espoused by Wellhausen and then his later associates, claim that that's not the case, that the Bible was written 1,000 years after the events that it purports to have recorded. It has J source, E source, P source, D source, and they're cobbled together much, much later. What we found contradicted that, and it also supported an early date for the Exodus. And these are high stakes, and everybody's got strong opinions that have been published. And so I was called everything from a child of God and a hero to a despicable individual and a forger and all kinds of things. So, when it all settles down in the end, we now see Bible commentaries that have already coming out or are coming out that have the new data in it from the inscription. And lots. I keep a list on my computer as this stuff comes out. But yeah, you would think that we had I don't know, said that the pyramids were built by aliens or something like that. We just presented in a highly rated, highly scientific, peer-reviewed journal the data that we had found. And I think over time, it will stand the test of time. Now, I'm not, and I never said, because I'm not a paleographer or an epigrapher, I brought together an international team of highly qualified scholars to work with me, even though I was the lead author. What I said is, I'm not going to publish this unless I have three epigraphers tell me that they're seeing ancient writing on it, and that's what I had. And so three qualified epigraphers with this ancient West Semitic, well, two with ancient West Semitic script, one just a general epigrapher. They confirmed this. We published the reading, and I'm confident that it does mention Yahweh and that it does mention a curse. Now, exactly what it says is difficult to discern, and I tried to be very open about that, because the text meanders. It's vertical, it's horizontal, it's meandering, as texts were in the late Bronze Age.
You mentioned the documentary hypothesis, and maybe a couple words that are written on this Defixio tablet that could just blow the documentary hypothesis completely out of the water. And that's two names for God, one Yahweh and Elohim. Um, what 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 would you say to the scoffers, to those who are saying, "Hey, this is nothing but a lead fishing weight"? What is your response to that?
Well, first, let me address the El Yahweh. So, cursed are you by the God Yahweh. God was El and Yahweh is Yahweh. So the fact that El and Yahweh exist simultaneously is the key point, because the whole thrust of the documentary hypothesis is that they're separated by hundreds of years, and that this is a sociological, anthropological, that's all religion is, development, and so they're hundreds of years apart. If we're right and they're side by side, there's no way that the documentary hypothesis can be correct. So they're incompatible. Now, what was the second part of your question?
The
I'm sorry.
second part, for those who were to say that, oh, this isn't a defixia, this isn't
Oh,
a lead curse tablet, it's just a lead fishing weight that we somehow left on the top of a mountain. What's the response to that?
well, Ami Mazar, who's one of my heroes, wrote this article, and he sent it to me before it was published, and as a courtesy, and said, I know this isn't, you're probably not going to like this, but here's what I'm publishing. And then, of course, that was published in IEJ. Um, Ami told me when we spoke that 9 months prior to writing that article, he knew nothing about fishing weights, nothing, not even a fisherman. Now, if Amir Mazar is telling me something about the Iron Age inhabitants of Israel, I'm listening and I'm questioning what I'm writing if I'm in conflict with that, because I have great respect for Ami Mazar. I think he's one of the best. But he told me he knows nothing about fishing weights. And when he was in a museum, he saw folded lead pieces, which were fishing weights, and they have it's a piece of lead that folds over the rope on the bottom of the net. So there's a groove in the top of it where the net is, and they find these on the coast at fishing villages. So um, here's what I would say in this IEJ article. Well, first of all, your biblical readers. Is it Proverbs 21? The first one to present his case sounds right until another comes along. So Ami, makes this case that these are fishing weights. So if you go through it, he presents 333 of these fishing weights of this type, because there's a typology of different types of weights. 333 subdivided into A and B. 331 of the 333 are type A, and 2 are type B. The one that he claims is the Mani Bowl is the type B. In other words, there's only 2 examples that have ever been found of this supposed subtype, and they're both on the coast near Gaza, which is where you would expect to find fishing weights, if that's indeed what those are. And ours is found inland at the highest point in the highlands, and there is no groove in it. All the others have the groove for the rope, and they're all on the coast. So once you start dismantling this, it really doesn't carry the water.
Doesn't carry the weight.
Doesn't carry the weight. That's my quick response.
Um,
Not to mention the fact that I saw for myself on the tomographic scans, and we studied these for 18 months. I mean, I've had no skill in reading tomography, but we developed this over time, looking at hour after hour of seeing these scans, because you're looking through lead and seeing the slices. Yeah, I saw them for myself, the proto-alphabetic script. Ox heads functioning as alephs. I mean, hello.
I've heard a lot of people talking about this tablet, and especially the inscription in it, written on the outside, and then through CT scans, looking on the inner inscription, and what was published by Gershon Galil, by Peter van der Veen, and a lot of people preaching this from pulpits here in America, that hey, that maybe this was actually written by the hand of one of those Israelites that were there at that time. This is the fulfillment of what is it, Joshua chapter 9, Deuteronomy 28.
Right.
You've been a part of quite a bit of archaeological excavations other than that, and one of them that you had already mentioned was Khirbet El Makader, which could possibly be, and more than likely is, the biblical city of Ai. Now, what would you say is the most exciting discovery that you found there?
So that's a good question. I succeeded Bryant Wood as the director of excavations, and Bryant had founded the excavation in 1995, and then I took over in 2013. And so for the last 4 years, shepherded the project through, and then through the publication phase. Um, smaller dig in a difficult area to get to, but a very important dig because the site was in the process of being destroyed by urban, well, agricultural sprawl and vandalism. So if we didn't excavate it, we would never be able to extract this evidence. We found very early on the gate on the north side of the site, the gate complex, a multi-chambered gate. That was important because the Bible, which is the only source we have for I, says that the gate was on the north. And had we found it on the south or the east or the west, we would have said, okay, well, we had a hypothesis, we tested it, it wasn't true. There was a 15-fold criteria, kind of a criterial screen. And over time, we were able to check off things like the gate is on the north. And I think that's the basis of the case to be made for Kermit O'Connor as I, is that it does check off these topographical and archaeological requirements. As far as small finds, there's a lot of interesting ones, like a scarab of Amenhotep II, who, if we're right, if that is the pharaoh of the Exodus, that's very dateable, just above bedrock. We have a decapitated ram's head, which is probably the Egyptian god Khnum, the creator god Khnum, who creates man on the potter's wheel and so forth. You can see the decapitation marks where it was hit 3 or 4 times and then it's finally chopped off. And the Bible says that's what God told the Israelites to do. When you come into the land, you're going to desecrate the idols of the Canaanites. And so maybe they kept we didn't find the body. Maybe they kept the body and melted it down and, something like that. But there was the head in that same level. So a lot of interesting small finds, the pottery and those types of things are very important in the case that we made as well.
That's pretty awesome. Just behind me in a case, it's probably out of focus right now, but you can see a couple heads of ancient Judahite pieces that were broken somewhere around 800 BC. But
Okay, are these the JPFs, the Judite pillar figurines?
yes, Judahite pillar
Okay, of
figurines.
course these are
Mhm.
ceramic. Ours was lead.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, that's why I'm saying there were chop marks. The heads and the arms get broken off easily on these ceramic ones, but on not on the lead ones. So there's actually, cut marks on this.
Wow. So that is definite evidence of intentional decapitation.
From my perspective, yes.
So, in what ways would you say that your discovery strengthened the historical reliability of the Old Testament in the eyes uh, the Christian?
I have just written the archaeological supplement for a new study Bible that in the next week or two will be out by Thomas Nelson. Folks will be able to purchase it. It's a remake of the Open Study Bible that's been around for a while, but it's the 50th anniversary, so they've redone this. And I wrote a new 50,000 word archaeological supplement. So I encourage people to check that out, and they'll be able to have, from a conservative perspective, 50,000 words talking about all the archaeological discoveries throughout the southern Levant and how they do interface with the biblical account and how they do supplement our faith. I would say that it takes more faith to believe that the Bible is not reliable than that it is reliable, because we have hundreds of synchronisms, Danny. And I just think that a fair-minded person, and not everyone is fair-minded, but there are a lot of people who are skeptical who just haven't been exposed to the right evidence, that they would be open-minded. And if we began to show dozens, hundreds of synchronisms, then I think we would have to conclude that the Bible is a reliable historical source. Now, from my perspective as an evangelical Christian, that says to me that there is a God of the Bible, that these are not random synchronisms, and that God holds a moral claim on our lives.
Amen. So, Scott, as somebody who does believe in the accuracy of the biblical record, what would you say would be the most faith affirming discovery that you have encountered in your career?
So the trifecta at Shiloh, I think, is the answer. So when we found the gate of Shiloh mentioned in the biblical text, and also, by the way, mentioned in one of the Amarna letters. I have a chapter in a book coming out soon on documenting one of the Amarna letters as mentioning the gate of Shiloh, which is also mentioned in the Bible. That gate, the monumental building, which is the dimensions of the tabernacle of the Mishkan, east west, the cultic material with it, and then the favisa, that we talked about earlier. Those three things, taking them together, knowing the biblical text, and then uncovering these. And I did not expect to find these things. I said earlier in my perfect world, but I wrote an article back in 2016. You can find it on my academia page, the location of the tabernacle. I said I thought it was most likely on the summit of the site. That's what made sense to me. So I was as surprised as anyone when we uncovered this massive building on the northern slope. I wish I could say it was my archaeological acumen or something like that, but it wasn't. So um, we found what we found, and you can say providentially, that we chose to excavate in that area, because we could have worked for 50 years and not excavated the right area of the site, but perhaps providentially we chose to begin there, and that's where we uncovered these things. To me, that's very faith affirming. So there was a biblical sacrificial system that operated at the time that the Bible says that it was operating. And you think about it, it's really powerful, because people like Hannah and Elkanah and all these folks, they came to Shiloh just like us, with the same problems and hangups and sins. Sin fractures our vertical relationship with God, our horizontal relationships with each other. It was through the sacrificial system that they were able to reestablish those and to reconnect with each other and to have fellowship with each other. And so, like, when we're dealing with those bones and all this material, yeah, it's a long, tedious work process. But I do stop every once in a while and just say, you know what, this is really awesome. This is really amazing that we get to do this.
So if you had unlimited resources, what biblical site would you excavate next?
Well, that's a very good question. I had not thought about it in terms of truly unlimited resources, but I do have my eyes on one more site. When we finish the Shiloh excavation, we're thinking of probably 4 more seasons of excavation to finish these three important areas at Shiloh. But I do have a site inside Jerusalem. So it would be a Jerusalem dig that is a conquest site also. So give me a chance to explore one more conquest site, and then try to, from a regional perspective, to understand all of this. What was happening at that time, and what we call redemption history.
What's next for Shiloh? What else are you looking for? What's your specific focus for this year's season?
Those three areas, we need to finish the gate complex, the monumental building, and the favisa. And so for the next 4 years, that's my focus, is those three things. Finish bringing down the soil, finish the analysis. And there's a tremendous amount of, post excavation work that goes into this. A lot of articles that are in the works right now that are, going to shed light on this. But that's what we'll be doing, and I'm estimating 4 more seasons that it will take us.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned the gate complex several times, and you found something really interesting about some flooring there. Can you
Oh,
enlighten us about that?
we did. We found this last season. Pay, we reached floor level, just above bedrock. And when we were finding, as we were coming down on bedrock, we were finding a lot of paving stones that were geometric, that were dislodged out of context, ex situ, we would say. But we assumed that they were paving stones. And then as we got down to the bottom, boy, was I surprised. We actually found an in situ section, an undisturbed section still with geometric pavers. This has never been seen in the Bronze Age. We know them from the Second Temple period. I'm talking about triangles and hexagonal shapes and rectangles and geometric paving. Well, fortunately, as I mentioned Frankie's name earlier, Frankie is a member of my team, so she's there on site, and she's the one who cracked the code of the Herodian temple and the Herodian palaces by the Opus Sectili paving stones, the geometric paving stones. She has a master's in geometry. And so using that background, that's what allowed her to crack that code. And so we've got the expert on site with us. And so she's just chomping at the bit to analyze this. So that is really interesting.
So do you think that the Herodian temple paving stones and the geometric shapes were maybe patterned after this flooring that you see there?
I mean, I would be surprised. I don't know, because we have not found it at any other sites. And would they have even known that it existed? I don't know, but we'll see. We're going to research this, and we've got some more of it, hopefully, that we'll uncover this year. And then, it'll be fun to publish this stuff.
That's pretty exciting. Yeah,
Yeah.
this has been a fascinating conversation. You're working biblical archaeology, yeah, particularly at Shiloh and Mount Ebal, Kerbet al-Maqadir. It's shedding light on the historical reliability, the historicity, the veracity of Scripture. And I want to personally thank you so much for taking your time today to share with us. I know our audience will be eager to follow your ongoing work and your future excavations. But before we close, if people want to stay updated on the latest discoveries or get involved in your excavations, where can they find more information? Can you tell us about how to get involved in the dig at Shiloh?
Absolutely. And thank you for your kind words. It's really a privilege for me to be able to do what I'm doing. Our website for the dig is digshiloh.org. Digshiloh.org. People of all ages, ability levels can come, and we've got things for everyone to do. That's got a lot of work, whether it's labeling things or whether it's actually in the ground excavating. And then I would also mention our school, the Bible Seminary. We have it's an accredited seminary. We have among our master's degree programs is a Master of Arts in Biblical History and Archaeology. And so if someone really wants to take archaeological classes or pursue a degree, they can go to our website, thebibleseminary.edu, and check that out.
Awesome. Well, again, Dr. Stripling, thank you so much for being with us today. I can't wait to see what this next season of discoveries holds at Shiloh, and I hope that the Lord will continue to bless your work. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us, and be sure to stay tuned for more discussions on biblical archaeology and the latest findings that are affirming the truth of God's Word. So until next time, God bless.